think that some folks see caregivers as predominantly females, but what we do know from the statistics is that it's a pretty even split between females and males providing care. And the majority are part of that sandwich generation. So folks who are managing work and who have families, children, spouses and partners that they're caring for, but also their parents or other in-laws or other family or friends that they're supporting. So that makes up a pretty big chunk of the population. These numbers come from something called the Spotlight Report, which is available on our website. All of the information I'm going to share with you today is available on our website. And in 2020, we did a Spotlight Report really focused on caregiving during COVID-19. So we know that the landscape of caregiving changed significantly once the pandemic hit for a lot of different reasons. And so if anyone's interested in learning a little bit more about that, I would encourage you to go to our website and check out the 2020 Spotlight Report. We know that a large portion of caregivers said it became more difficult to manage their responsibilities since the pandemic hit, especially for those who are supporting a person with a mental health or addictions need. It became really difficult for those folks to access support for their loved ones due to those restrictions. And we also saw an impact on caregiver finances as a result of the pandemic. So 4 in 10 caregivers reported that they were incurring higher costs and they were dipping into their own personal savings, their own financial capacity to provide improved and enhanced care for their loved ones. Of course, there were more caregivers that came out of the pandemic as people became ill from COVID-19, and folks were providing more than 10 hours of care per week. And that caregiving responsibility really grew as the pandemic grew, and it continues to be a challenge for a lot of folks. So some of you who may not have participated in the talk I did 2 weeks ago may not even, oh, I apologize. There's some sort of transition on my slide deck. So let's see if I can fix that. So I'm going to just touch a little bit on what we do, and I'm just going to talk about it without the slide because I don't know how to fix that while we're talking right now, and hopefully we don't continue those transitions. So essentially, as an organization, we provide awareness and recognition for caregivers. So we really want to enhance the role of caregivers across the province. As I shared, there are a significant portion of caregivers doing this work in communities and in healthcare settings and long-term care facilities. And so we really want to amplify and recognize that healthcare, folks in the healthcare system are the backbone of our healthcare system. And so we want to do that through promotion. We use our social media, we do television advertising, radio advertising, and that sort of thing. We also want to be sort of that central point of access to information for folks. And that doesn't just mean OCO's information. That can also mean what's happening in the community at a regional level with other organizations, which we're going to sort of talk about today, and how 2 different services can support and complement each other. And so we want folks to be able to come to our organization as that sort of central point of information to access information and support. And I'm going to talk to you in a minute about some of those programs and services that we offer. We also don't want to duplicate any existing services. And so we know as a relatively new organization, so we were developed in 2018. And so we're kind of that new kid on the block. And we know that a lot of really great work was happening already for caregivers in communities and within other organizations. We don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to help amplify the work that's already happening and avoid duplication where we can. And lastly, a big part of the work that we do is really integrating the voice of caregivers into everything that we do. So only caregivers know what it's like to live in their world, to walk in their shoes. And so we really want to integrate their experience and into how we develop programs and services, how we implement them, and really integrate their voice. And so some of those programs and services we offer are information and resources. And again, I'm not going to spend too much time going into this today because I spent about an hour talking about it 2 weeks ago. So if you're interested in knowing more about the details of these things, I would encourage you to go back to the Elder Abuse Ontario website and check out the webinar that I did 2 weeks ago. But I'm going to touch on them really briefly for those of you who may not have joined back then. So we do have information and resources available on our website, and that includes information around working caregivers for those who are new to caregiving. So we have toolkits and tip sheets. We have all sorts of direction to outside organizations and the work that other people are doing, as well as the information that we have to offer and resources we have to offer. We also have a focus on education, and we do that through webinars. So we do offer webinars twice a week, twice a month. And they cover a wide range of topics. So they are delivered by subject matter experts, and they're all recorded. We know that caregivers are not always available on Thursdays between noon and 1. And so we want to record all of our information to ensure that it's available for folks. Our webinars, like I say, cover a wide range of topics. They can be really applied learning, like acupressure techniques to help reduce stress. Some of them are mental health and well-being focused. Some of them are disease and diagnosis specific. In January, it was Alzheimer's Awareness Month, and we did 2 talks on dementia-related subjects through partnering with the Alzheimer's Society of Ontario. We have a webinar today, part 1 of a 2-part series on how caregivers can plan for emergencies. So we try to sort of cover a wide range of things. So I'd really encourage folks to check that out if that's something that they're interested in and want to learn more about how to support themselves and their loved ones. We also have caregiver support programs. And so a big part of that is peer support. So we do offer online support groups for caregivers that are facilitated by our team. They're small groups, and really the point is to provide emotional and social support for caregivers. We also have a one-to-one peer support program, and that's a telephone-based program where peer mentors can connect with a person looking for support, a caregiver looking for support, and really be able to connect on a one-to-one sort of level to, again, provide that emotional and social support. We also have a program called Scale, and Scale has been really, really well received. It's an 8-week program where folks, caregivers are looking for more of that mental health and well-being support. So again, it's facilitated by registered professionals. All of the webinars are recorded, and they provide information, but they also provide tools and strategies for caregivers to implement to help address things like grief, frustration, anger, stress, identifying what stress looks like within you, all of these sorts of things. But what's unique about this program is not only does it give you that information and tools, but it also provides caregivers with an opportunity to connect in small groups or one-on-one with these registered professionals outside of these webinars to really be able to integrate some of that learning into their own experience and their own lives. So those are some really, broad touch points on some of the things we offer for caregivers. And of course, there's a lot more. So again, if you're interested in knowing more, connect with me or check out that other webinar. But the point of today is to talk about the helpline. So I'm really excited to be able to dig into this a little bit deeper with folks. So what is it? It's a free and confidential helpline for caregivers to connect, to get information and resources and a little bit of support around their own caregiving needs, but also if they have questions about their loved one and getting support for them as well. So this helpline is a great example of how we partner with organizations. So it is powered by 211. So again, we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. We wanted to leverage something that already exists. And so we've worked really closely and continue to work really closely with 211 to enhance their knowledge of caregiver needs. They receive some initial training and some guidance and support around what the needs of caregivers are, and get ongoing support through our program lead, who deals with the helpline to really make sure they have all of the tools and information they need. So it is available over the phone 24/7. You'll connect with a community resource specialist, or there's also a live chat feature that's available on our website, and that's available Monday to Friday between 7 and 9. So who can call the helpline? It is designed for caregivers in Ontario who are looking for supports, but really anyone can call. So, I mean, when we created this, I remember this was the very first thing that we did. And I remember joining the team at OCO in November 2019 on the day that we launched this helpline. And it was beautiful chaos in the office where we were all rushing around trying to support the launch of this. So it's been active for a little over a year now, and we've gotten some really wonderful feedback, and we're collecting ongoing data. But really, it's available for anybody to call and access that information. Again, it's available to caregivers regardless of where they live, how old they are, and what the diagnosis or the need is of the person that they're caring for. We want the helpline to serve as a tool for caregivers to get support for themselves, not just their loved ones. But service providers can also use the helpline to find information if they're looking for more tools for their patients or the people that they're supporting in the community or within their organizations. We have a lot of healthcare provider resources on our website as well. And so some of those can be linked back to service providers, in addition to local and provincial resources for caregivers. So what to expect when you call. So essentially, when you call the helpline, you're going to get a trained and certified community resource specialist on the other end of the line. Our service is available in English and in French at the moment. And they're going to listen to what your questions are. They're going to maybe ask you a few questions to clarify some information. And then they're going to be able to pull up as many resources that are relevant to your question or your need as is available, and give that information to you. So if you were to call by phone, they're going to listen to all that, ask those questions, and then be able to give you those details in real time about what's available, options that you might have, and give you the relevant information so you can connect with those things. If you connect with us through the chat, they're going to be able to read through all of that information. And again, if there are any clarifying questions, they'll ask those things and then be able to provide you in real time through the chat that information. What else is unique about our helpline is that a follow-up call or email is offered as well. So it is a confidential helpline, which means you don't need to share any details that you don't want to share. But if you are open to having a follow-up call, if you choose to accept that, they're going to collect the basic information that is needed to get in touch with you, whether that be over the phone or through email. And really the point of the follow-up is to make sure that what we offered was helpful. Was this useful? Did you run into any difficulties? Do you have any more questions that maybe we can help? Maybe sometimes when people call and they deal with that particular concern, more things crop up and they're not really sure what to do. So by doing that follow-up, we're able to sort of see if what we did was helpful, but also offer any additional support that might be needed. And again, that's available if you accept it, but you can also decline that again, depending on your situation. So a little bit of context around who we're reaching and the folks that are calling our helpline. So again, this has been happening for about 1.5 years now, since November 2019. You can see here that we get predominantly females and those within that adult range calling us, but there's a big chunk of unknown because it can be confidential and people aren't necessarily providing us with that information, and that's okay. They don't need to, but this gives us a bit of an understanding of sort of the demographic of folks that are calling us. 93% of the calls result in referrals. So sometimes we acknowledge that the helpline isn't always going to fit for every single person. Sometimes there are really experienced caregivers that are better system navigators than I am, or anyone who's worked in the healthcare system or the community for a really long time. They know it's available and they have a really specific need or a really specific request that maybe it's not available in their community or not available right now. But 93% of those calls do get some sort of referral, in many cases, multiple referrals when they call the helpline. And you can see that the majority of folks calling are those who are caring for a senior. A lot of the more common concerns, some of you might be wondering, some of the more common questions that come through are really around things like system navigation, caregiver mental health, caregiver burnout, and really practical things like respite services and financial aid and financial support types of questions. So lastly, before I turn it over to my colleagues and to share more about what they are doing is, if any of you are on the call today who are service providers and want to know sort of how you can spread awareness about our helpline, please know that if you go to our website, again, everything lives on our website, under our helpline section, you'll find a tremendous amount of resources that are ready made for you to print and distribute. So if that's through social media, if you want to put a poster up, much like what's on the screen here, this is an example of one of the posters that we have to promote our helpline, or other promotional materials. We've sort of prepackaged all of that, and you're able to put it up in your clinics or your community offices or wherever you might work, to remind you, but also the caregivers that are accessing the services, that this is another option for them as well. And really just encourage you to share the helpline with the folks that you're supporting. And often we get the question of, well, am I in the database? And so again, as I mentioned, this is powered by 211. And so if your organization does live within the 211 database already, then yes, you are included. And if it doesn't, you can check that really easily by going onto 211's website and looking through their database to see if your organization is there and ensuring that the information is current. So the folks at 211 do an amazing job of annually checking in to make sure all the information is up to date. Sometimes things get missed. So I would just encourage folks to check it out and make sure everything is well represented within that listing. And then you'll know that you're a part of our helpline. So lots of information there. I want to make sure that there's enough time for, like I say, my colleagues who are going to speak a little bit more about their work. So I want to thank you all for listening to me talk a little bit about the helpline. This is how you can find me if anyone wants to ask any specific questions offline. I know we'll have some time at the end for questions. That's where you can find our website. And I would encourage you all to check that out. And so I'm just going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to turn it over to Rochella and Latoya so everyone can learn more about the work that they're doing.
Thank you so much, Katie. Laura, if you want to make me the presenter, I will share my screen.
You should be able to share your screen.
Oh, okay, wonderful. All right, let's see here. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Katie. And thank you so much, Ryan and Laura, for inviting us to come back and speak about the senior safety line. My name is Rochella Watson. My preferred pronouns are she and her. And I'm the Senior Associate of Community Engagement and Seniors Initiatives. And I'm joined by my colleague.
So I was trying to figure out how do I unmute myself. Hi everyone, my name is Latoya, and I am the Service Support Coordinator at the Assault Women's Helpline / Senior Safety Line.
So Latoya and I will both be co-presenting. So the Assaulted Women's Helpline has been around for over 35 years, and it serves as a free anonymous helpline and TTY line geared towards women who are experiencing abuse. The Senior Safety Line is a program of the Assaulted Women's Helpline, and I'll get into the Senior Safety Line in just a bit. But to understand our umbrella organization, which is the Assaulted Women's Helpline, our primary goal is to support women who are experiencing any type of violence in their lives by providing crisis counseling, safety planning, and information and referral. And we work in tandem with other helplines and organizations that work in both the violence against women sector and the social services and geriatric sectors as well. Now, the Assaulted Women's Helpline works from an anti-racist and anti-oppression approach to services. We are a very diverse team, from the board all the way down to anyone that works there, and we come from a diversity of experiences and perspectives, and it really helps to build a culture of being inclusive and recognizing the callers may be coming from different communities, whether it's based on their culture, their race, the language that they speak, the physical geography, if they're calling in from a rural and remote area. And so because we are representative of the diverse community, we can appreciate some of the additional barriers to accessing services and equity issues that some of the callers are facing. And so we work with other organizations that provide services to our diverse communities to ensure that, we are meeting the needs of our diverse population, and really to bridge the gap in some of the services. So both Latoya and I work in the training, resource, and outreach team. And so the Assaulted Women's Helpline has the helpline for the Violence Against Women helpline, and then they also operate the Senior Safety Line. Both helplines are available 24/7 and have access to interpretation in over 200 languages. And so part of the role in the training, resource, and outreach department is to provide training to organizations to reach out to different organizations that are providing direct services, and to capture the types of services that they offer, and to ensure that we're updated in regards to any changes in service, especially as a result of COVID-19. And, we provide some training as well to the helpline counselors, because we recognize that ongoing training is essential for them to be able to provide the information and referral. So we're a diverse group. We're operating 2 different helplines, and we also offer that training and outreach and resources. So the Senior Safety Line, began in 2009. Originally, it was a partnership between the Ontario Network for the Prevention of Elder Abuse, which is now known as Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. And it was a partnership between them and the Assaulted Women's Helpline. And we were operating on a 3-year Trillium grant. And essentially the Assaulted Women's Helpline, manages the calls. We have the infrastructure to be able to do that. And when the funding ran out, the Assaulted Women's Helpline continued to operate the Senior Safety Line with no, promised annual funding. So we recently did receive some funding, $130K from the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. And we have been receiving funding from them. It's never, we don't know year to year how much funding we would necessarily receive. Back in 2013, we did also receive a 1-year Trillium grant to partner with 211 as well to manage the Senior Safety Line. But since 2014, the Assaulted Women's Helpline has been the sole operator of the Senior Safety Line. And so the goal of the Senior Safety Line is the same as the Assaulted Women's Helpline. It's to provide emotional support, safety planning, and information and referral. So who can call the Senior Safety Line? Essentially anyone can call the Senior Safety Line. The majority of calls are coming from older adults that are living in the community. Those older adults may be experiencing abuse or may be at risk of being abused, but we also have a high number of calls from service providers, family members, and friends who are concerned about an older adult and want to gather some information on organizations that could potentially help, or they are looking for some validation and emotional support themselves.
Sorry, I'm still figuring how to unmute myself. So who answers the call? So when you call the Senior Safety Line, it is staffed by trained crisis counselors. Our team consists of social workers and mental health workers who have extensive training, work experience, and live experience in violence against women, elder abuse, and the social service sector. All of our counselors must meet strict standards and which includes comprehensive training, supervision, and ongoing skills development. Some of the calls that we're getting surround like some of our most common calls these days during COVID-19 surrounding anxiety, how to cope, whether you're living with abuse or if you just want to cope with COVID-19 itself, depression, isolation, and of course abuse. If you're living at home with a partner that's abusing you, or doesn't even live at home with you, but they still somehow find ways to taunt you during these times. So you have to live with a pandemic within a pandemic if you're somebody who's living with abuse or have suffered with abuse in the past. So when you call us, we try to make sure that we're offering you that emotional support.
Thanks so much, LaToya. So just to clarify, as an anonymous helpline, we are not obtaining the caller's personal information. And as a result, we are unable to do any type of wellness checks. So we only offer services over the phone. And we are not a reporting line for abuse. So while there is, legislation under the Long-Term Care Homes Act and the Retirement Homes Act to report elder abuse, they each have their own specific reporting line. So we are not taking any types of reports. So the other thing to note, as a result of the pandemic and looking at how we needed to modify our services, especially in regards to safety planning, we launched an online chat. And so the online chat launched in November. It is not available 24/7. It is only available between Monday and Friday from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. And so if you simply go to our website, you can see the chat option and you can connect with a counselor that way. So in terms of who is contacting us across the province, the majority of the calls, and we sort of break it down by area code. So these are stats from 2019 because we have not yet compiled the ones based on area code for 2020. But you can see that the majority of the calls are coming from the 416-647 area, which is the GTA. And then when we look at other areas like the 905, which would be Southwestern Ontario, could be also Peel, 32%, 613 in Eastern Ontario, 29%, and the 519, which could also be, the HNHB area, Hamilton, Brantford, etc., 20%, and then 807 being Northern Ontario, 8%. What was also interesting when we look at the statistics is that we do receive calls from outside of Ontario. So we do receive calls from other provinces like Nunavut, keeping in mind that in some of the other provinces, there is no senior safety line or provincial helpline, either for seniors or for women in some cases. And so, our job is pretty busy trying to also procure resources in some of the other provinces as well to ensure that we can take those calls. So when we look at the statistics, this is looking at the onset of the pandemic. When we do a comparison for the first fiscal year, so March to May of 2019 versus March to May of 2020, you can see that our numbers drastically increase, specifically in the senior safety line. The assaulted women's helpline numbers also drastically increase, but if you look at May as an example, the calls, more than tripled. When we look at it on a larger scale, so if we look at the number of calls between April 2019 to March 31st, 2020, which is a fiscal year, the amount of calls were over 8,000, almost 9,000 calls. And then when we look at, again, the pandemic and the impact of COVID-19 on the senior safety line, we can see that between April 2020 and December 2020, so not even a full fiscal year, that the calls more than tripled again. So, over 27,000 calls. So we're feeling it. We're feeling the increase in calls. Now, the impact of COVID-19, when we look at specifically, through the senior safety line, we're seeing older adults that are experiencing higher rates of isolation. Many of them are having to abide by the COVID-19 sanctions that have been imposed to stay at home, and in some cases quarantine. And so it can be really difficult for them to be able to talk to anyone about any type of abuse that they could be experiencing, as well as the fact that many of them may be quarantined with the person who is behaving abusively. And so in some cases, they also might not actually have any outside supports being able to come in, especially during a quarantine, which increases the risk of isolation, which can increase the risk of abuse and abuse escalating. So how does it work? What is our intake to transfer process?
So when you call the senior safety line, your call will be answered by one of our counselors. For safety reasons, we will ask the callers if they're in a safe space or not before we proceed. So, because our main goal when you call us is to listen. We want to give you the time to talk. We want you to support you. We may ask you questions, but they're not personal questions. It's just questions to understand the situation. And if appropriate, we will provide you with resources that can offer you ongoing support, because sometimes some of the calls, that's what they're looking for. They want ongoing support, and we're only there for the immediate part of it. Because of COVID-19, our line has been increased with calls. So sometimes when you call the line, you will get a message that's telling you that we are busy at this time. However, to call us back in 5 minutes, and because we don't want you to give up. And that's one of the reasons why we also introduced the online counseling. It is not 24/7 like the crisis line, but our goal is to still provide you that same emotional support you'll receive over the phone, online as well. So if you call us, you can't get us during the week, just try to get to us online. Like I said, we don't want you to give up, and we don't want you to feel alone during this pandemic and after the pandemic. Yes. Sorry. Thanks, Rochella.
Thanks, Latoya. So just keeping in mind when we're talking about safety planning, and especially safety planning during COVID-19, that, we are only able to provide strategies and suggestions based on whatever the presenting issues are of the caller. So sometimes we'll get people asking us questions like, whether or not the older adult is capable or not. Well, we have no idea of assessing that, right? So if an older adult calls us, we are going to assume that they are capable, and we are going to provide them with information and strategies on how to safety plan based on what their presenting issues are. Similarly, with care partners or family members or friends that call us, oftentimes we'll have family members that are calling that are saying that something needs to be done, that their parent is being abused and, their parent is no longer capable. Again, we can only provide that family member or caregiver with strategies, based on what their presenting issues are. And so when we look at the information and referral piece, we are providing callers with the organization, helping them understand the process of intake and what to expect from that organization, and then they contact that organization themselves.
So I'm answering questions and as well as the thing. So during the safety, because I was saying with COVID-19, we had to modify our safety plan for each caller. In the past, we did that, but we're finding that during the COVID-19 right now, we had to make drastic safety planning because, of course, we know that with the abusers being at home now, the safety planning has to be quick before the abuser gets home. We used to have where if you call us, we ask the abusers not to be in the home. But now because of COVID, they're in the home. So we're trying to figure out, are you in a safe place, whether it's in the bathroom or the abusers in the garage or outside, whatever the case is, we're trying to make sure that you're safe to speak with us, whether it's for 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever the case is. So one of our goals that we did, we're trying to help women flee, and we're trying to help them to flee, but in a safe way. So we have partnered with the BAW shelters in Toronto, the Violence Against Women shelters in Toronto. So you'll have to call the Assaulted Women's Helpline. We will then do an intake, and if appropriate, we will put you to a shelter that has available space. The shelters will then do their own assessment, and if you're eligible for their shelter, they will accept you into their shelter space. We also encourage women to call us, whether you were placed in the shelter or not. We are also partnered with some of the other shelters out of the GTA, like Ottawa and some other places. Partner with some of the Violence Against Women shelters as well. Again, trying to make sure that these women and children can flee in a safe place, and we're doing the assessment for them. So we're not calling around a bunch of shelters, but we have the database to show that they have these space available. They accept pets, no pets. They have to just try to find out as much information as possible to make sure that we're doing appropriate referrals. And we're also updating our database. So we're trying to figure out which agency is currently up and running, because due to COVID-19, a lot of funding has been cut. So all these agencies are cutting programs, or the agencies no longer exist. So we have to make sure that we're connecting with all these agencies to find out how can we support you in this transition, and just letting partners know that we are still available 24/7, and letting them know about our online chat, because again, you're home with your abuser, you may not have access to your phone. So a good way to do it is by doing it online. And we're also, yes, offering the online counseling. And we're looking at partnering with another agency that can help women that are looking to flee. So like, sorry, I'm trying to think about their programs. So they're a program that they help women who are fleeing from domestic violence. So they help them move and stuff. So they put their belongings in storage, and we try to figure out if they go into a shelter, and we'll help them to go to the shelter, while the other company now will put their stuff in the storage. Or if they have somewhere to go to, they'll move their stuff into the person's home, into their new home. And we try to do that as safely as possible. So we have security guards, and then we'll have police officers if it's a higher risk situation. So we're looking at different ways that we can help people transition out of abuse and live an abuse-free life. I think that's it that we have for safety planning.
Great, wonderful. Thank you so much, LaToya. And that also includes older women that are interested in going to shelter. So how do we support caregivers during COVID-19? We know that COVID-19 has had a significant impact on caregivers and access to respite. So there are times where we might have a caregiver who's calling who is experiencing some burnout because of the lack of respite. Potentially, they're caring for somebody that has Alzheimer's disease, and now they can no longer attend the adult day program, or maybe the adult day program is operating virtually. And so, they might have difficulty coping. So they would call us and we can provide that emotional support. If they're not connected to an Alzheimer's society, we can provide that information to them and referral. We also had an increase in calls for caregivers who, were not able to go and visit their family member who was living in long-term care because of the COVID-19 sanctions that were imposed. And so again, it's providing that emotional support to family caregivers and looking at what organizations, depending on what the nature of the illness that the person has, and then connecting to an appropriate agency. So we're available 24/7 through our helpline. We are also going to be instituting a specific TTY line just for the senior safety line. For now, you can use the Assaulted Women's Helpline TTY line, so we're accessible. And so anyone can connect with us also via chat Monday to Friday between 11 a.m. and 8 p.m. If you would like to connect with us for some training, you can connect with us. If you're interested in some swag, so some pens, pamphlets, etc., please connect with Latoya and she can send you a mail order form. And of course, we're on social media, so you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And I'm going to invite Katie back, and Ryan, I don't know if you're, or Laura, if you're going to moderate this, but we came up with 2 slides to sort of look at our complementary services.
Yes, thank you both for your great presentations. And it's the statistics just amaze me in terms of the increase of calls since COVID has happened, and the support that caregivers and families are reaching out to get some support. So so thank you both for such an informative presentation. I know that there was a couple questions. I think I think Latoya was answering some of them. But yeah, so here are some of the similarities that between the safety lines and support lines. Both providing that information referral, the online chat, the interpretation or interpreters for English and French, and they both operate 24/7. One of the questions I was just wondering about is how, and others might have, is around how the transition for someone with a different language than French or English happens for both either the phone and on the chat, if that's available for both services. I know it's just English and French with Katie with the Ontario Caregiver organization, but is it right away if someone types French that would just go to a translator? How does that happen? Maybe you can start with Katie and then we'll go to Rochella.
Yeah, so my understanding is that the folks that are responding to the French requests are French speaking, so they have that capacity to be able to interpret in real time. So it isn't intended to be like, okay, well, please hold and we'll get back to you with somebody who can translate, which is where why our helpline is specific to English and French. I know that the safety line and the Assaulted Women's Helpline are available in many more languages, which is phenomenal. But ours is more of a live interpretation. So there are folks who have that capacity already.
Yeah, I'm going to defer that to Latoya because Latoya actually works on the helpline. It would be better versed to answer that question.
So for now, online is only in English for now. Well, if you call our line, if you call the senior safety line, you just say that you want to speak French, Farsi, whatever the case is, we will connect you. We will get connected with an interpreter using language line. And then we will tell the interpreter just to tell the woman where they call, and I'll tell the interpreter what their jobs are, because we don't want the interpreter to be having side conversations, because sometimes it does happen. So whenever that I realize it's going on for a little bit long, I'm like, hey, we're asking you to stay within the conversation and not outside of it. And we also let them know that we on the line are the one that's providing the counseling, and your job is just to translate. That's if you call Senior Safety Line. However, if you call the Assaulted Women's Helpline and you request a French speaker, we will then direct your call to the FemAid line, because they will do the same job. But the agreement is that if it's French for abused women, we refer them to the FemAid line.
Great, thank you. Laura, was there any other questions that you might have seen just through the chat boxes?
Yeah, so there is two other questions. I did think that there was value here with Rochella's slide of just if we could highlight, I get these questions as I do the consults for the province for Elder Abuse Prevention Ontario. And there is always that confusion. So Rochella, maybe you could just draw out 5 of the biggest differences between your line and the caregiver organization line for me, or for us.
So our focus is more on violence against women and abuse and isolation. So the senior safety line is geared towards seniors, whereas the Ontario Caregiver organization, you could be receiving calls from caregivers of any age. And so I think that's a real big key difference in terms of the senior safety line. We're providing safety planning. So we will have a little bit more time to sort of go through what some of the risks or safety concerns are, and then work with the caller to develop a safety plan. But we both do provide that emotional support. So I think that those would be sort of the big main differences, and of course our access to interpretation in over 200 languages. And then we do get calls from other areas, so not just Ontario, but Nunavut and other areas as well.
Thanks, Rochella, for highlighting those important differences. So I'll just get to the questions here. A lot of interest from service providers as far as who funds the senior safety line as well as the caregiver organization. So maybe Katie, if you could.
Yeah. So the OCO is funded through the Ministry of Health. So all of the programs and services that we offer are funded through the Ministry of Health. We don't have any additional funders, grants, or foundation support, etc. We are 100% funded through the ministry, which would include Katie. Our helpline.
And Rochella?
So we do receive funding through the Ministry of Seniors and Accessibility. So it's not annualized funding, but we have been receiving some funding to keep us going.
Yeah, and there are years when we don't receive any funding at all. So the Assaulted Women's Helpline had to take on that responsibility to keep the line going because we see there's a need for it.
Excellent. And the last question for this session today is, organizations are interested in knowing how they would get on the list for your helplines to be a referral resource. So Katie, maybe if you could go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So I touched on that a little bit in my presentation. So if folks are interested in ensuring that they are on our database or in our database, they can go to the 211 database to determine if they exist already or if they want to update that information. So that's the easiest and most effective way of just confirming that your organization exists there and that the information is accurate and up to date.
And Rochella, for the SSL?
People can connect with either Latoya and I, and we are actually strategically working on reaching out to different sectors. So if you haven't heard from us, you probably will be hearing from us to obtain an update, because that's something we have our own internal database that's not accessible to external organizations. So it's part of our routine to connect with organizations annually, but we've had to ramp things up because of COVID-19.
Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Rayanne.
Great. So thank you all for presenting today and for joining us again. I think it's been very enlightening just to recognize those the differences and similarities and where people can go for help, and to check out the website because I know that both of you have information on the websites that provide more detail and information about what you offer and resources that they can either download. And thank you for our interpreters that are joining us today and for all the participants. We will be uploading the presentation within the next few days onto the website, and you'll be able to access this and share with other colleagues who were not able to join today. So thank you again. We do have presentations on next week on the 23rd and the 24th with the Ministry of Finance, and they will be talking about taxes and as we all get ready for the tax season and the breaks for particularly caregivers and seniors in regards to that. So on the 23rd is being provided in English, and on the 24th in French, and you can find an update of other webinars that we're doing on our website under upcoming events. So thank you all again, and we look forward to working with you continually in supporting seniors in their community. Have a good day.